To survive, boy will need an incredible skill. In this world, stability is maintained by making the strong even stronger, and the strongest can also eat more, thus increasing their spiritual energy. But one soldier discovers a mysterious power in this world. In the midst of a battle, the leader of one side is informed that the left flank is fighting well and managing to defend the plantation, but the right flank is being pushed back. Amid the war zone, humans resist the invasion of giant primates, wreaking havoc on the defensive lines. Among the protectors is Kai, who stands alone against a semi-human and calls his comrade Manso for help. However, Kai is knocked down and left vulnerable as new enemies surround the young fighter, while Manso is thrown away by a blow. Kai was about to be hit when a man strikes the primate from behind and saves the boy. Having done that, this warrior introduces himself as Alha, the eldest son of Malak Vezin, and the humans around celebrate the arrival of their lord. Tired of the invasion of these apes, Alha commands the foes to behold the power of the earth god residing within him. Instantly, the divine crest is activated on the noble's face, a proof before all that he bears the god's blessing. Soon, the apes attack again, but Alha easily cuts off the arm of the first and the head of the second. In their own language, one of the primates tells the others to back off, while he himself steps forward to challenge the blessed warrior alone. This ape is different from the others as he also bears a divine crest that radiates on his face, which theoretically would make the fight balanced. Confident, the semi-human charges with all his fury, but Alha's speed is unmatched. Using his agility, the man dodges a powerful blow while delivering an extremely deep cut to his opponent, ending the battle sooner than anyone could have imagined. Thus, the inhabitants of Lag Village raise their flags and celebrate the victory, as the remaining apes flee following the death of their leader. Observing the horrifying chaos left on the battlefield, Manso comments to Kai that they survived another day. Amid this, Alha extracts the divine stone from the enemy chief to feed on it. Then he orders his allies to do the same with the stones of other dead primates. Consuming the substance, the Lord is graced with a reddish aura around his body. Manso breaks a divine stone and shares it with his comrades. Before partaking, he gives thanks to Mother Earth and the spirit of the brave Earth God passed down to them by their ancestors. As the soldiers ingest the substance, they feel their spiritual energy increasing. Since eating the marrow of a divine stone boosts spiritual energy and makes you stronger, Kai wants to take more, but Manso warns him that it won't happen because they are merely common soldiers. Amid this, a warrior informs the Lord that the other stones will be delivered to the castle. An older fighter named Master Basco tells Manso and Kai that most of these items should be delivered to the blessing bearers, like Lord Alha. After all, stability is maintained by making the strong even stronger. That's how this world works. Realizing this, Kai laments that common soldiers like them need to become stronger without the aid of such useful resources. Later, at a feast involving the village residents, the leader declares that human lands in remote areas like theirs have been under attack by semi-humans for a long time. Yet Lag has been defended thanks to the effort of its brave warriors. He, Malak Vezin, is proud of each one of them. Sick of the talk, Manso just wants to eat quickly, and luckily for him, Moloch concludes the speech with a brief prayer of thanks to Mother Earth. Elated, Manso attacks the food but struggles with a part of the meal that is extremely tough to bite. Around him, another soldier at a table would love to eat as much as his comrades. Then a companion remarks that he just needs to work harder. By the way, Kai notes how lucky Manso is to get more grub than him, and the friend replies that he isn't the squad leader for nothing. With that said, Kai vows to train until he drops and gets stronger for a more worthy diet. Keeping his promise, the young warrior trains with his spear in the middle of the night, but ends up falling on his back on the ground after missing a step. Definitely, the meager food he gets isn't enough. As our grandmothers say, an empty sack cannot stand upright. Furious, the boy yells for a rice ball. Then Manso arrives at that very moment and asks what the heck a rice ball is. The friend explains that it just came to his mind, and although he doesn't know what it is, he's sure it must taste good. Manso responds that the kid sometimes really flips out, which he agrees with completely, even if he has no idea why. Finally, Kai asks his buddy to look at the village graves meant for people with families, and then compare them to the graves for people like him, who have no parents or siblings. They are just twigs and stones covered in vines because these people have no one to mourn their death. Therefore, the boy believes he is doomed to be forgotten. Being honest, he feels as though he never lived in this village from the start, and this creates a need to not accept this reality. And that's why the warrior will become as strong as he can to survive. For that to happen, he needs to eat the little food available and train harder than anyone else. But not just that is enough. To survive, Kai needs something to help him win battles, like a skill that could elevate his status to another level. Listening to every word, Manso reinforces his theory that this kid lives in a fantasy world. Meanwhile, Alha is in the middle of a discussion with his sister Jose. According to the Blessed Warrior, their father does not expect the girl to do what he does, considering that the women of the Baron's house do not need to learn to fight. Saying this, Alha takes the staff from his sister's hand and walks away, and Jose laments that she could have helped the village if she were a man. Returning to the private, he's training with the squad leader who makes it clear that the kid won't win any battles if he just keeps backing down. At one point, Kai is hit and falls on his back again, but instead of colliding with the ground, his body simply sinks into a fantastical sea that was covered in embers. Suddenly, an electrical reaction charges his floating body up to a modern city in another world, while his hand generates a layer of strange energy. Kai wakes up at this very moment and starts to believe he was the victim of some magic. Manso thinks he's knocked another screw loose in the poor kid's head with the blow and apologizes, but Kai gets up with strange confidence and a smile on his face. Alone with his thoughts, he reflects that he was confronted again with memories of things he never experienced in life. Sometimes he sees unknown memories that he's never heard of, and as far as he knows, some people are like that. But there's no way he can tell someone he also goes through this, not even Manso. In fact, it was these memories that introduced Kai to rice balls, but these visions changed nothing in his life, even if it is magic or something of the sort. Indeed, Kai has never seen magic in his life because that's something that only exists in fairy tales, but for some reason, these things keep appearing in these weird visions. Now, if by some chance he could use spells in a battle, it certainly wouldn't be bad. Later that same night, Moloch Vezin receives a message through one of the village's trained eagles. Upon entering his home, he discusses with Olha about a horde of orcs that appeared in the forest to the west, indicating that the battle will be fought near Villa Banya. The alliance ceremony is due in a few days, so Villa Lag must hurry there. Yesterday it was the monkeys, and now the orcs are ready to cause headaches again. Moloch laments that the soldiers simply don't have time to rest, but his son reminds him that it is a soldier's duty to march and shed blood to defend their land without question. Still, the leader argues that all the villagers are Moloch's children. Unable to sleep, Kai comments on the absurdity of producing flames with his hand. In the bed next to him, Manso wants to understand what trip he's on now, and Kai explains that he was thinking about something like a waking dream. Manso says that it might not be a dream, as there was once a traveling monk who, without a fire sign in a completely dark place, raised his finger and summoned flames, using it as if it were light. Kai is impressed by this and asks if it's really true, and his friend says it's just a story he once heard. The next day, the young dreamer leaves the dormitory early in the morning and thinks about what he heard before falling asleep. Perhaps, for some reason, he might also be able to draw fire from his fingers. That is, if this magic thing uses magical power. If that's what it is. As far as it is known, this business is obtained by gathering the mysterious power that exists in the world. And the world in which Kai lives is also made of a mysterious power. Spiritual energy is within each person and increases when they eat divine stones. If a good amount of this energy is gathered, perhaps the boy might be surprised with something special. To test his theory, Kai first goes to the plantation at the back of the dormitory and tries to summon fire with his finger through a vocal command, but nothing happens. Then, he holds his wrist with the other hand and focuses all his mind on the finger, but it seems that mere desire is not enough. The question would be how he can gather spiritual energy. Considering that this energy is probably inside his chest, Kai focuses his mind to feel that area of his body, and feels a kind of heat where his divine stone would supposedly be. Letting himself be carried away by this heat, he points his finger forward again to try to shoot fire, but with the force he was making, it was easier to drop his butt. Amid this, a legion of orcs marches westward, leaving a trail of dead humans along the way until reaching the vicinity of Villa Lag. Without delay, Master Basco learns from a message from the Baron of Villa Bagna that the enemy species is observing their movement from within the forest. In a joint action, soldiers from both villages unite to investigate the woods, and when orcs are seen lurking, a group of human scouts advances on them, including Kai and Manso among the battalion. Manso pierces the chest of the first target and knocks him down. Kai tries to maintain his balance amidst this duel, but ends up being hit by a comrade from Bagna who was thrown on top of him. The responsible orc slowly approaches his next victim, who is trapped under the dead soldier and can't get free. But just when he would be killed, Kai is saved by numerous arrows that hit the monster. Enraged, Manso orders Kai to stop messing around, while the young fighter feels a sharp pain in his leg. Meanwhile, Lord Alha shoots through the trees of the forest and sinks an orc's head into the ground without even needing his weapon. At the same time, the other giant pigs that saw what happened to their buddy flee, and Alha chases after them. A soldier thinks about pursuing the enemy as well, but a colleague warns that it's no use, as they are invisible to the Lord's eyes. Manso is forced to carry his injured partner, who apologizes for causing this trouble. Suddenly, a soldier alerts that Lord Alha has left this area to the soldiers, which confuses the squad leader since they still have orcs in the fight. Kai asks his friend to leave him there, but of course, Manso refuses and carries the young man back to the base. Master Basco orders the rest of the squadrons to spread out and run, so the orcs can't pursue everyone. To the misfortune of the young injured man, there was an orc pursuing him and his companion, but very slowly just to have fun. Knowing that the two will die there if things stay as they are, Kai asks Manso to leave without him. After all, Manso would do the same if it were the other way around. Saddened by the harsh reality, the ally promises to tear the vines off the boy's tomb, then runs off. Finally, when Manso takes off running, Kai heads back into the eye of the storm, where his comrades are fleeing and dying at the hands of rival semi-humans. Meanwhile, the young man refuses to die, reminding himself of this as often as necessary while memories of his life flash before his eyes. Soon, he stops when he senses the presence of his pursuer and demands that he stop hiding and face him. As a last resort, the human attempts to cast magic from his finger, but nothing happens. Suddenly, a machete flies towards the boy, slicing through his shoulder and causing faint sparks to fly from his index finger. The orc who threw the machete charges at the boy and grabs his neck tightly. Yet Kai continues to refuse to die, not wanting his spiritual energy to be extinguished in this place. With that, the boy's chest begins to burn so intensely that it ignites slightly stronger sparks on his finger. Kai points his finger at the enemy and orders fire magic to appear, and that's exactly what happens. A layer of flames spits out into the face of the giant pig with such intensity that it forces the brute to release the human. In the end, the orc tries to rejoin the fight but succumbs to his injuries and falls. Watching what happened, still amazed, Kai feels proud of himself, although he can't control the fire still covering his hand and burning his body. To make matters worse, he collapses to the ground without knowing why, and now a chill begins to take over his body as if his life is being drained by having used too much spiritual energy. This makes Kai think he might die right there, but since he managed to ignite the fire, he imagines he might also be able to extinguish what remains on his finger, perhaps with water. Moreover, this reminds him that spiritual energy flows like water, and that it's necessary to close the imaginary gate to stem the flow. As if that weren't enough, the orc manages to get up and goes after the boy. Faced with this life or death pressure, Kai closes the gates of his mind and stops the flow of water that sustains the flame on his finger. However, still weak, the boy is carried by the pig without being able to react. Even though he can barely see due to his injuries, the orc takes his victim to a cliff to kill him as he deserves. But since he was going to die anyway, Kai takes a final breath and slashes the belly of his adversary with his knife. In this motion, both of them fall off the cliff and plunge into the water waiting below. Even weakened, the young man emerges from the water alive and sees his seemingly dead enemy beside him. Kai approaches and extracts the core to digest it, as he is out of spiritual energy and won't be able to leave without regaining his strength. Upon consuming the liquid, the young warrior walks to a tree to rest at its root, realizing it was the first time he had eaten an entire divine stone. Despite this, the wound on his shoulder is too deep and the bleeding won't stop, leading Kai to believe this might be his end. Near death, He observes the beautiful landscape around him and believes he will depart from this world happy to have had the privilege of witnessing such beauty in his last breath, even though he did not wish to die so soon. Regardless of his wishes, the boy faints, completely drained of strength. At night, the soldiers gather after the battle. One asks Manso where the rookie who was with him is, but seeing the squad leader's silent reaction, he decides to drop the subject, as unfortunately, such losses are all too common. Many hours later, as the sun rises on the horizon, Kai is awakened by its radiant glow after blacking out for the entire night. He was certain he had died, but for some reason, the wound on his shoulder had healed and no longer hurt. The warrior suspects it's due to the org's spiritual stone, yet it's strange that he healed after just one night's sleep. Taking a closer look at the tree he leaned on to sleep, the vines wrapping around the trunk felt oddly familiar to him, though he couldn't explain why. Then, he notices something carved into the wood. He casts a fire spell to see more clearly under the plants. To his surprise, the spell was so powerful that it threw him a great distance, and looking at his reflection in the water after being tossed, the boy sees his face covered by a divine emblem, the mark of the blessed. Suddenly, the emblem disappears, and Kai returns to the tree to decipher what was written, but he had never seen those letters before. Not understanding how his face bore a divine emblem, he runs to a pile of crumbled rocks to escape, but during his climb, his emblem reappears, and the strength from it causes him to break one of the rocks he used to ascend. Back on the sand, he picks up another rock to make sure it was indeed he who broke it with his own hands. Amidst this, a voice in his mind utters the word "Go," prompting Kai to scale the cliff with dazzlingly high leaps. Disbelieving what he had done, he reaches the forest and looks down at the mysterious tree that seems to have awakened something within him. As he walks deeper into the forest, Kai thinks the power he acquired is even more incredible than magic, but he wonders if it really could be a god's blessing. Anyway, if he truly is blessed, he celebrates the fact that he can eat as many spiritual stones as he wants. But then another doubt arises. Maybe he isn't blessed, despite having a divine emblem. Whatever it is, it's best kept a secret for now. Hours later, Manso does his duty with a sad expression, but soon he relaxes and smiles when Kai emerges from the forest. A day later, despite his disappearance and the serious injury he sustained, the young man was back to work as usual. Alarmed, some colleagues approach Kai and ask how far he plans to plow the land alone. Looking around, the boy realizes he has almost completely plowed the field by himself, something humanly impossible, at least in theory. At least, looking at his reflection in the water of a bucket, he notices his emblem didn't appear, even though he had exerted so much effort. During the rest period, the folks think something is wrong with this kid, so he justifies that he ate divine stones until he was full, and that's why he's so strong. During the battle at Banya village, a group of orgs was killed in the forest, and Kai claims he ate 10 or 20 of them, since he was injured and hungry. Manso buys the story and recalls hearing about someone who greatly evolved after eating several such stones. Thus, it might be that the kid really jumped levels overnight. Meanwhile, a woman notices Elsa eyeing the men and asks if anything there caught her interest. Nearby, Lady Jose asks Master Basco how the preparations are going, and he shows that he chose the best offerings for the tombstone. Remote lands like their village are scarce, but the people manage to harvest well thanks to the feats of the Lord of the Domain and the Earth God within him. After all, the blessed are the protectors of the land, and their strength makes the land fertile. After making sure no one was looking, Kai goes back to the dormitory grounds to practice his magic. This time, focusing his finger with a vocal command, he actually manages to fire flames and also doesn't feel his spiritual energy depleting. Therefore, he's sure he now possesses incredible power, but still doesn't know if he is blessed or not. Unfortunately, the boy is caught by Lady Jose, who tries to understand why the kid's finger is on fire. Kai tries to give some excuse to get away, but the Lord's daughter insists on knowing what he's doing there. Thus, Kai ends up telling the truth and reveals he was trying to produce flames from an ability he acquired, though he doesn't exactly know how. With this, Jose asserts that the boy might have a talent for being an ability user, a person who uses mysterious techniques that seem impossible. That's what members of special families from the central region and some monks are called. Honestly, Kai thought that was magic, but the girl has no idea what that word means. Setting that aside, she notices Kai didn't even get tired from all this and wants to know if he's the boy from the rumors, who ate a bunch of divine stones and became powerful. When he confirms it, she observes that the boy is still intact because he has more spiritual energy than usual, so he might be stronger in every way too. With this in mind, Lady Jose decrees that Kai will train with her. Without delay, the two began a mock combat right from the start. Feeling the pressure from his opponent, Kai realized the power that the blessing could bestow upon a person. With his crest pulsing, Jose asked if that was all the kid could do after devouring so many divine stones, prompting Kai to promise to pick up the pace. After the exercise, he looked at his face in the water once more, believing that his crest hadn't appeared at all during training, which meant he hadn't pushed himself hard enough. Then, he carried a bucket of water for the Lord's daughter to clean up and confessed that he thought all the blessed were equally strong. Jose responded that she was still weak and that her father and brother were much stronger. According to her, the strength of the blessed varied depending on the strength of their earth god. But the blessed themselves must also train and develop, and that's what the girl still needed more training. Kai responded that she didn't need to train so hard, which annoyed Jose, as it seemed he was implying that women didn't need to be strong just because they weren't required to go to war, when, in fact, blessed women were also protectors of the land, and there always came a time when they had to fight. Moreover, of course, those who possess the blessing become powerful to win battles, but that's not the only reason. Jose was about to explain that reason but was interrupted by a sound signaling the time for something that needed to be done. Soon, she gathered her things to leave unnoticed, as her father was unaware that she trained this way. Kai asked her to finish explaining the other reason why the blessed train, so the girl invited him to join her in the monthly cleaning of a tombstone shortly. Kai questioned what that was, and Jose mentioned that her earth god was celebrated in Ida village, but she would only share the rest when they were there. Sometime later, a group of soldiers led by Manso escorted Lady Jose to that village. The commander warned his subordinates to stay alert, as this domain was monkey territory. One soldier asked Kai if the rumor was true, that their squad had been chosen for the escort because the Lord's daughter had chosen his company. Manso interjected to say that Lady Jose didn't even know this kid, but some among the men believed the rumor, making Kai the center of attention in the group. Further ahead, upon reaching a ruin on the way, a soldier told Manso and Kai that this village had once belonged to the Moloch family, but they had fled from being attacked by demi-humans so often. In any case, there was still a tombstone there, and their mission was to prevent the earth gods from continuing to receive proper treatment, with a worthy homage to the dead. Besides that, the soil of this region had become completely infertile, given that the grace of the earth god had diminished and was not reaching this territory. With that said, to the surprise of the seasoned warrior, Lady Jose approached and told Flynn that she wanted Kai's company to take a look around the village. Jose led Kai to an area where there had once been a plantation, but now it was just a pile of dead flowers in a turned and dead field. In turn, Jose prayed for the grace of her god to gather in that space, creating a red aura that flowed through the plants. She explained that the blessed had the power to do this, but unfortunately, the spirit of the god had weakened too much after Ida village was abandoned, and it also had to be taken into account that Jose herself, the blessed of this region, was not strong, and all she could do was tend to this small flower garden. For instance, the plantations of Lag village grew well because her father was strong, always keeping up his training and consuming divine stones to maintain the power necessary for the health of that soil. The stronger the blessed of that land, the more fertile the land will be. The more fertile the land becomes, the more powerful the god gets. In short, as Jose had said, the blessed don't train just to fight, but also to honor the power of their god. Nearby, a soldier returned from a subterranean passage and confirmed that there was nothing unusual inside. Flynn ordered Squad 1 to stay there and protect the area, while the rest would go down with Lady Jose. Once in the depths of the underground passage, Kai encountered the tombstone of the Earth God and noticed that the same inscription was also on the stone of the valley, making him think that it too was a tombstone of a god. Soon, the boy discovered that he could read what was written if he touched the tomb. It said, "I, Idolin, am your servant. I serve the god of Lagdalacta." Then, he moved to another side of the tombstone to try reading, but this time he couldn't. He understood what each word meant, like temple or pact, but they didn't form any sentence. Jose asked why the crazy guy was talking to himself, and distracted, Kai ended up looking at the girl's neckline, which made him even weirder than he already was. Around the ruin, two monkeys approached the area and saw the movement of the humans. Inside the subterranean passage, Kai shared that he didn't know Jose trained to become strong for Ida village, and she shared that one day she intended to rebuild the village. After all, she had received the protection of Idolin, the earth god of Eda village, which made her responsible for this place. Thus, the woman promised to one day become strong enough to cultivate all types of plants and make the flowers she loved in this village bloom, so that many people would come to live there. Listening to her speech, some soldiers around got excited to accompany the lady on her mission, while Kai reflected that a blessed had a responsibility to the land, the gods, and the people. He himself, on the other hand, had no land, god, nor responsibility. At that moment, a warrior alerted those present that there was a threat lurking outside. Outside, Flynn ordered Manso to send his squad to escort Lady Jose and escape through the front, while some men threw sand over the tomb to hide it quickly. Regarding the rest of the soldiers, they should attack the enemy from the rear. Jose approaches with a spear and announces she will join the fight, but Flynn reminds her of her importance. Therefore, she must return safely to Lag village. Moreover, Jose has no combat experience. Hearing this, the girl is hurt by those words, but there's no time for that, so Manso accompanies her to a safe place. The two monkeys approach the ruin, and one of them throws a stone at a soldier who is shielding himself behind a broken wall. Manso's squad runs with the Lord's daughter in the lead, but the other monkey from the pair catches up and even steps on the flower garden Jose was trying to cultivate. Extremely nervous about this, the girl steps in front of the others and points her spear at the enemy. To make matters worse, another giant monkey suddenly appears, but Jose does not falter and introduces herself as the daughter of Moloch Vezin, claiming that the power of the earth god resides in her body. Similarly, the opponent does not back down. Then, when Kai sees the monkey about to hit the woman with his axe, he pushes her back and rips open his chest with his spear. Following that, the boy picks up the simian's weapon from the ground and runs towards the next one, striking a spear blow into its chest. However, the monkey remains standing and knocks the human's spear away, leaping to plunge the axe into his opponent's shoulder and then the dagger into his back. From this moment, Lady Jose sees the divine crest on the young soldier's face. After the battle, Alha scorned her sister for stepping in front of the enemy only to embarrass herself, hoping she had gotten the message this time since, as everyone knows, women don't need to learn to fight. Jose was about to argue against this, but the tribe chief intervened, saying what mattered was that his daughter was safe. Regardless, the two siblings should not let their guard down in this area, and an inspector from the central region would soon visit. After Alha left to inform the soldiers about this, Lady Jose asked her father for forgiveness for her actions. Uninterested, Moloch highlighted the name of Kai, the recruit who could defeat a monkey on his own, and he had high hopes for him in the future. Meanwhile, two of Kai's peers teased him after he was hailed as the hero of Eda village. Kai claimed it was just a fluke, but it was too late. The boys had heard from Akiza and others that the kid had sent the monkeys packing without hesitation, and he had even befriended Lady Jose in the process. The women working nearby, seeing a man applying a chokehold for free to a friend, wondered why every man was like that, until Manso arrived at the trio Ternura and asked what they were doing standing around. One of the women remarked to her colleagues that this boy, who had consumed several divine stones, might actually be promising. They then noticed Elsa looking oddly at Kai and teased that she had a crush on him. In the midst of this, Jose approached Kai and asked him for a moment, their relationship somewhat alarming the people. Eventually, Jose took Kai aside and thanked him for saving her in Ida village, mentioning the divine crest she saw on his face during the fight, though she wasn't sure if she had imagined it. Speaking of the fight, she confessed she had frozen in front of the enemy, which made her realize that being strong wasn't enough. Skill and a mind to use whatever was necessary were also required. With that in mind, she decided to train every day, starting tomorrow morning, and she wanted Kai to join her. Later, Kai was chopping wood for the village while pondering the invitation he had received. Elsa approached the young man and handed him some water. With a stern face, she said she was only doing it because others had told her to. The boy drank the water and expressed his gratitude as he was thirsty, until Elsa's colleague called her to help with something. As she left, Manso suddenly appeared just to remark that spring had come early for the fellow. Suddenly, a bird's call caught Kai's attention. He felt as though he had heard it before. In fact, he remembered hearing it in that valley, which sparked a desire to go there. At night, while everyone was asleep, Kai was awakened by the same bird's song. He got out of bed and headed toward the sound. With a majestic leap, he jumped over the village wall and used his newfound strength to boost his run in a way he never imagined possible. In his mind, it was as if he had become the wind itself. Confident in his new abilities, he jumped off a cliff and landed in a river. Surfacing, he let out a laugh while floating in the water and noted how much he enjoyed this valley. He then saw the bird that had been chirping, and it was flying around a tree that seemed to want to show something to him somehow. There, a huge stone was enveloped by the roots of the giant tree, with inscriptions that Kai, unfortunately, could not read, just as he hadn't been able to at the tombstone in Ida village. Regardless, Kai believed he had survived because this tree had bestowed a blessing on him, so he thanked it for the great help. With a tool he had on hand, he cleaned the tombstone as a sign of care and respect, while we see a shoulder guard of war on a nearby stone. After cleaning up, the boy ran through the night and noticed how strange it was that he could see everything so clearly, even though it was not daytime. Further along, he drank water from the river and picked a fruit from the valley, so thrilled with the fertility of these forests that he considered living there. In fact, he took it seriously and thought about building a house in the place, then climbed the cliff and concluded that he needed to fix some trees, but his sword wouldn't do, so magic would have to be the way. Thus, the boy attempted to form a blade of fire in his hand to cut the trunk, but ended up setting the wood on fire and thwarting his plan. Nevertheless, Kai didn't give up and thought of an alternative. As he knew, magic transformed what he imagined into reality, so the trick was the imagination. Cutting something meant breaking the bonds between molecules, and remembering that fact made the boy visualize a scene where he didn't necessarily cut the molecules, but instead undid the bonds by sliding an invisible blade between them. However, a sudden flight of birds in the forest interrupted the process, making him think someone was approaching. Indeed, a group of orcs was lurking in the valley by dawn and seemed to be on a mission. Like them, Kai saw a group of humans preparing a rope to descend into the valley, so he conjured his crest and charged at them. Upon nearing those beings, he discovered they were not humans, but rather looked more like children with pointy ears and funny faces. One of the little ones approached with a knife and showed undue bravery by threatening the supposed intruder, until a more experienced companion calmed the young Ketchak and introduced himself to the human as Lord Porek, leader of the Coral people. Kai admitted he had never seen anyone from this species before and was surprised that they spoke the human language fluently. Then, Porek explained that they had regular interactions with human traders, as the men considered the coral's craftsmanship extremely valuable. With that, the man knelt alongside his countrymen and apologized for entering a restricted area without permission. They had come to implore Kai for the ancient covenant of the great god of the valley, believing that this boy was a deity resembling humans. Upon hearing this, the corals bowed before the young man, who was taken aback by this unexpected behavior. Later, Porek meets with Kai by a campfire and shares that, since ancient times, the corals lived peacefully in the forests and worshipped the earth gods. However, a few days ago, the pigs or orgs, as they are called, attacked his people in an attempt to seize their earth god. Unfortunately, the coral species is too fragile to contend with warriors as strong as these, resulting in their expulsion from the lands they had inhabited for years. Now, all they can do is flee. Due to this situation, their race's leader has pleaded with the god of arbitration for salvation. Kai doesn't understand why he is being called this way, so Porek explains that an arbitrary deity is one whose great power surpasses that of all creatures and protects all of creation. Kai responds that he is far from being such a grand entity, and Ketchak also finds it hard to believe that this boy could be a true god of arbitration. After all, the avatar of the valley god they began to worship was a warrior who meted out severe punishments to the unfaithful, and this small human could not compare to that legendary figure. Still, Porek believes Kai is the right person, as he had once entered the valley without permission as a youth and endured God's wrath, gaining a condition that affects his eyes. Upon meeting the god of the valley, he lost his sight but began to see all kinds of things. According to the Coral, this world is filled with spiritual light, the light of spiritual energy, and Porek sees that Kai is imbued with a noble blue light of this kind, making him realize at first glance that the boy is the god of arbitration who has received the valley's blessing. Moreover, the elder mentions that he has already offered a sacrifice to the god. His granddaughter Aru gave her life to the valley. Outraged by this situation, Kai leaps into the valley in an attempt to save the girl. The corals try to pull the rope to bring her back, but it snaps. Quickly, the human reaches the injured coral and, remembering how he healed his own wounds, thinks he could do the same for her by imagining her getting better. Thus, the boy visualizes the cells in his mind, although he doesn't quite know what they are, but he focuses his efforts on imagining them restoring in some way. This visualization generates a small wave of magic that directly affects Arua, so Kai assumes she has been healed and places her back on the ground to rest. Then, he hears the sound of orgs. They had arrived and were already causing chaos among the coral people at the valley's entrance. Ketchak tries to protect his lord while cursing the pigs in every name possible. A little girl was in danger and about to be struck by a giant pig, until Kai steps in to stab the enemy in the chest, ending its life on the spot. Immediately, the corals who witnessed the scene thank the intervention of the great god of arbitration, while Kai watches the scene of destruction and death. With anger in his expression, he approaches some orgs and demands to know their business there. In their language, one of the pigs tells the boy to stay out of it, and a crest lights up on the beast's face as it speaks. Suddenly, a voice inside Kai tells him to kill the orgs and make them pay for what they did with blood, instilling fear in the enemies. Kai assumes it is the voice of the valley god, and indeed, the tree's tombstone was emitting a strange bluish energy, which makes him even more certain of this theory. The human decides to follow what was said and prepares to instill fear in the enemies. Similarly, Porek steps up to join the battle, as he also bears a divine crest and can be useful. According to the chief, the coral people of Hachel village swear devotion to both the valley god and the god of arbitration, so they must fight this battle, which is also theirs. Then, the orgs see that Kai has a blessing and wonder if it could be the blessing of the valley, which terrifies them. Nevertheless, their leader demands that the human be killed along with the corals, so his subordinates attack recklessly. Kai responds with his vast ability by finishing 2 pigs with just 1 strike each. When the third charges at the boy, Porek shows his skill and subdues the monster with his sword, impressing Kai. Despite this, the coral chief makes it clear that this is the extent of the combat techniques his species can perform. From now on, Kai must resolve the situation. Thus, the god of arbitration emanates his crest, takes a sword from one of the orgs, and slowly approaches the rival leader. Since the giant pig has contaminated this valley, Kai cannot allow it to leave alive. The org tries an excuse, arguing that this is not a matter for humans, but between corals and orgs. However, Kai makes it clear that this matter is also his, as these monsters entered the valley without permission. The org farts in fear and promises to retreat immediately, but it's already too late. Exuding a bluish energy, the god of arbitration announces that he will kill the pig for the peace of the valley. The org sees the image of the valley god manifesting from the human's energy, which makes him sit on the ground out of sheer terror and beg for his life. However, his plan was only to create a diversion to attack Kai at the right moment, which he manages to do. But Kai cuts the beast's arm using magic, as if it were a blade in his right hand. Seeing this scene, the corals go into shock and try to understand what happened. Despite the severe injury, the org does not give up the attack, so Kai announces that the enemy must learn from its own blood. With his hand imbued with magic, the boy shreds the monster's chest while repeating the words about instilling fear in the opponents. In that motion, Kai pierces the creature's chest until he rips out its heart, and that convinces Ketchak that this is indeed the valley god intervening in the situation. Similarly, Porek recognizes the blue flames that burn his eyes anywhere, those eyes that the god took without pity, but that are also capable of granting mercy by carrying the scale of life. The god of justice who has looked after the world since the era of the gods. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.